It's 7:30 and I call the Board of Appeals meeting for Emmitsburg on July 19th, 2021 to order. Welcome. Our first order of business is to officially welcome during a Board of Appeals meeting to welcome our newest member, Dr. Wayne Slaughter. Congratulations for being an official member of the board. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Levi Esses. Welcome to the alternate on the board. And Levi will be sitting in tonight for Ron Lind, who is our typical member on the third member on the Board of Appeals. The first thing we need to do is to reorganize the board. So we need to vote for a chair and a vice chair. So do I hear a motion? Motion to. All right. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. So that was a motion by Wayne to vote for himself, to put his name in for a vote for vice chair, and a second from Levi. All those in any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 3-0. Do I hear a motion for chair?
Second.
All right. Wayne just made a motion to renominate Diane Walbrecker as chair, and that motion was seconded by Levi. Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye. All right. We have reorganized. All right. Diane will serve as chair and Wayne will serve as vice chair. We will need someone to take notes for this meeting. We don't actually officially ask for a secretary to be appointed because it's not in the code, but we do need someone to take notes. Is it possible for you to do so during this meeting? All right. Thank you very much. Levi has volunteered to take notes during this meeting. Of course, it's also recorded, so you've got a backup. So anyway, before we go on to the approval of the minutes, I'd like to discuss the Board of Appeals rules of procedure that you both received. These were written up based on the lawyer's recommendation that we officially adopt these. It basically consists of the same information that is in the code book, but it has a little bit more detail and kind of spells it out like procedures. So are there any questions about what you read in the rules of procedure? All right. On page, well, actually section 6.1 under decision. The only thing I saw was that I believe the word in the second line, first sentence, should be if it cannot be concluded at one hearing. Does that make sense? All right. Okay. So seeing as how that's the only comment that we have on the rules of procedure, do I hear a motion for us to formally adopt them as written with that one exception? Motion made by Wayne and seconded by Levi. Any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. 3 ayes, 0 nays. So, and Zach has already noted that correction that needs to be made. Okay, thank you very much. What I'd like to do next is to look at the minute meetings from September 9th, 2019. If you could bring those up. It's that one piece of paper there. And do you have those, Wayne? I got them there. Whoa. Attack of the microphone. All right.
You might want to suggest a change.
I didn't catch that. And look at all the other things I caught, but I didn't catch that one. Good. That's why we have triple sets of eyes on things, right? All right. Thank you very much. Now, Wayne, Zach, how would you like us to handle this? Just discuss the changes and then hand you a handwritten copy of,
That would be perfect.
would that be all right?
Yeah.
All right. Wayne, thank you very much for noting the date change. Appreciate that.
Just forward thinking.
I know, really, we're moving out. Making decisions for long-term recovery. All right. Under the attendees, I'll just point out some of the things that I noted and you guys can see if you noted anything else. First of all, I prefer the term chair instead of chairwoman, but it's in the book like that, so we'll just leave it. My name is spelled with a double N and there's a C missing, so that's just spelling. Second line in the third paragraph, I believe the word was left out, was to take place based on the alternatives. Fourth paragraph, there's an extra D, to approve minutes as submitted. Again, misspelling on the fifth paragraph. Administered the oath to all those who would be testifying, and then an extra D on approve request. In the middle of the paragraph there. None of these corrections change anything substantive that happened in the minutes. So what I'd like to do is ask for a motion to approve the minutes with the suggested handwritten changes. All right, the motion's been made by Wayne.
Second, did you get the third line where it said chairwoman, not chair?
I didn't get that one either. So thank you. Are there any other edits that we've noticed?
I don't think so. I'll second it.
All right. Thank you. Motion made by Wayne and seconded by Levi, again with the suggested edits, again with the emphasis that it did not change the meaning of the minutes at all. All right, any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, 3 ayes, 0 nays. So we've got that, Zach, and I've turned that over to you. So those minutes have been approved. Swearing of witnesses. If we could have everyone stand. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the response given and statements made by you in these proceedings will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? If so, state I do.
I do.
Thank you. Will you be speaking, Mr. Adams?
I'll be answering any questions that are put to me.
Okay, I'm not sure if that, it says including attorneys. Does that require you to take the same oath?
Well, since it says that, I will. So let me.
Okay, I'll give it to you again. I'm sorry, we just got new rules. I'm trying to follow them.
I appreciate the attention to detail. That's fine.
Okay. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the response given and statements made by you in these proceedings will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? If so, state I do.
I do.
Thank you, Clark. All right. Fantastic. Old business. We have no old business to discuss since we've already discussed the rules of procedure. New business. And I'd just like to make a comment before we start. I know it seems like there's a lot of rules and regulations to this, but what we do on the Board of Appeals is very important. So I just wanted to thank the members who are willing to take their time and participate in this. Zach, if you would describe the project to us, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is a variance application for 5 variances for 10201 Taneytown Pike. Applicant Tracy Deal and Tara. I'm sorry if I butcher your last name, Puntaseca. All right, from Expedite the Deal. The property owner is M&G Realty, other known as Rutters. Case number 2021-01. Property tax ID 05-158680. And this is the zoning district, of general commercial B2. Would you like me to continue with my staff report, Madam Chair?
I would. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Great. So just for housekeeping, this public hearing the property was posted on June 21st, 2021. Also ads were placed in the Frederick News Post on June 28th and July 5th, 2021. Project description: the applicant is requesting 5 separate variances for 2 on-premise digital display freestanding signs. Sign number 1, bordering US Route 15, variance request number 1 to Town Code Section 1738-170I3. The applicant is requesting to exceed the maximum allowed height for an on-premise freestanding sign in the general commercial B2 zoning district. The maximum height per the town code is 10 feet. They're requesting a variance of 50 feet. Amy, if you could turn it to, I think it's the 2nd or 3rd slide, maybe the 4th. All right, here we go. Perfect. So this is sign 1.
Zach,
I'm
if
sorry.
I could just double check that
Sure.
we're all in the same place.
Absolutely.
So these are a copy of the slides that are now being displayed.
Yes. So
Okay.
this, do you have in color? You want to provide? Yes, that's correct. Sure.
I would, yeah, I think a colored copy would make a difference. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure. Sure. Thank you.
Now, what we need to do is, do we need to make sure that this color version of the slides is entered into evidence?
Yes.
All right.
Exhibit 1.
Do we need a motion for that?
Don't need a motion, just need it introduced into.
Verbal?
Yeah.
All right. We'd like to introduce the color version of the PowerPoint slides that were given to us 3 days ago by email, entered into evidence
As exhibit 1.
as exhibit 1.
Yeah.
Thank-
And it'll just need to stay in the materials for this hearing.
Pardon?
It'll just need to stay in whatever file is generated for this hearing.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll take care of that. All right, Amy, sorry. If you can go back
thank you.
1 page.
Let me ask one other question before we get started. Would you like us to ask questions during this presentation, or because we've all read your
Right.
staff report?
Yeah.
Can we start the questions and the discussion now?
If you don't mind, I'd like to read through everything just for the public
Okay,
and then ask questions and after that, if that's okay, Madam Chair.
all right.
All right. So this is the sign I just spoke about is sign number 1 on the screen. As you can see, it's near US Route 15. Okay, variance request number 2 to Town Code 1738-170I2. The applicant is requesting to exceed the maximum allowed sign area for an on-premise freestanding sign in the general commercial B2 zoning district. The maximum sign area per code is 50 square feet. And the requested variance is 609 square feet. Amy, if you could go to the next slide, please. For discussion purposes, I'm going to call this sign 1A. Today, we put up on the back, Amy, if you could turn lights on, I'm sorry. The back wall, Amy and I measured out, and Amy can testify that these are accurate measurements. 1A on the screen here. Also, if you look at the screen, they're looking for a 29-foot wide and 50-foot tall sign. 1A is 29 feet to the edge of the wall. So from the green line to the edge of the wall, 50 feet. This 50 feet tall. This wall is only approximately 10 feet tall, 9 feet 8 inches. So if you can just imagine 5 times this wall in height. So sign number 2, Amy, if you could go to the previous slide. So sign number 2 is along Taneytown Pike near the off ramp, better known as State Route 140. A variance request number 3 to Town Code Section 1738-170 I2. The applicant is requesting to exceed the maximum allowed sign area for an on-premise freestanding sign in the general commercial B2 zoning district. The maximum sign area per code is 50 square feet. The requested variance is 162 square feet. And also the variance request number 4 to Town Code 1738-170 I3. The applicant is requesting to exceed the maximum allowed height for an on-premise freestanding sign in the general commercial B2 zoning district. The maximum height per code is 10 feet. Requested variance is 35 feet. And for discussion purposes, we're going to call this sign 2A. If you could go to page 6, Amy, if you could go to the 6th slide, I'll tell you when to stop. One more right there. So this is what we were just discussing. They're requesting a 14-foot wide sign by 35-foot tall. So if you look in the back of the room, 2A, this is 14 feet from the green line to the edge of the wall. Again, the height is 9 feet 8 inches. So if you can just imagine that being 3 times the height of the wall in the back. All right. And then for the both signs, signs 1 and 2, variance request number 5 to Town Code Section 1738-60 F4D. The applicant is requesting to exceed the maximum number of digital displays signs per property. Maximum number of digital display signs per property per code is 1, and they're requesting a variance of 2. Town code variance requirements of section 1712-50B of the code states no such variance in the provisions of the requirements of this title shall be authorized by the board unless the board finds beyond reasonable doubt that all of the following facts and conditions exist. Number 1, that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes of uses in the same zoning district. 2, that such variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same zoning district in the same vicinity. And 3, that the authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of this title or the public interest. So staff comments on sign number 1, variance requests 1 and 2. Staff is concerned that the proposed height, which is 5 times larger than the town code's maximum permitted height, and the proposed sign area, which is a little over 12 times larger than the maximum permitted sign area. We believe that this would be the largest sign within the town limits, and it could set a bad precedence if the requested height and sign area variances are approved. Due to its substantial size, we question if the nearest neighborhood, Emmett Gardens, would negatively be impacted by the proposed sign. However, we would support modified variances based on the following conclusions. A, the property is unique in that it borders 2 major state roads, US Route 15 and Taneytown Pike, other known as State Route 140. US 15 has a speed limit of 55 miles per hour and Taneytown Pike has a speed limit of 50 miles per hour. Only 2 other lots meet this criteria, which are directly north of this property. Based on data used to craft the sign code, staff found that larger signs are needed. on roadways with higher speeds in order for travelers to safely read the sign. B, the distance of the proposed sign to the nearest corner of the Rutters store, proposed Rutters store is approximately 800 feet, which is a significant distance for an on-premise sign. C, the property totals 15.29 acres. D, the property is large enough that the owner could potentially subdivide the parcel in which the proposed sign would then be considered an off-premise sign and subject to the requirements set forth in Town Code 1738-080, regulation by sign type off-premise signs. The sign would then be subject to a maximum sign area of 150 square feet and a maximum sign height of 15 feet. E, staff believes that approval of the modified variance of 150 square feet maximum sign area and maximum sign height of 15 feet would not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and should not materially impair the purpose of this title or the public interest. F, Emmett Gardens is buffered by trees and brush on the sign code sets 24 hours, 7 days lighting restrictions. Therefore, the smaller sign should not negatively impact that neighborhood. G, staff supports the modified variances is subject to the board's finding that the variances are permitted via Town Code 171250B. Staff comments on sign number 2, variance requests number 3 and 4. Number 1, staff is less concerned with sign number 2 because the proposed sign would not be visible from any residential neighborhoods. The sign is located on State Route 140, which has a speed limit of 50 miles per hour. Therefore, a larger sign may be needed in order to safely obtain the attention of those passing through the area. 2, as with sign number 1, we feel that it would set a bad precedence allowing a larger sign on this particular property than what is permitted throughout the entire sign code. For all zoning districts, staff believes that approval of the modified variances of a maximum sign area of 150 square feet and a maximum sign height of 15 feet would not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and should not materially impair the purpose of this title or the public interest. And 3, staff support of the modified variances is subject to the board's finding that the variances are permitted via Town Code Section 171250B. And staff comments on signs 1 and 2 for variance request number 5. Staff would support variance request number 5 if the modified variances of a maximum sign area of 150 square feet and a maximum sign height of 15 feet are approved. Due to the significant sign sizes proposed by the applicant, we would not support variance request if number 5, if the applicant's requested variances were approved. Number 2, if the variance application, the applicant states that signs 1 and 2 are spaced 1,000 feet apart and neither sign is visible from the other. Therefore, staff does not feel that the approval of the modified variance request would be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and should not materially impair the purpose of this title or the public interest. And number 3, staff support of the variance is subject to the board's finding that the variances are permitted via Town Code Section 171250B. And also, I won't go over these in detail. We did put in here suggested motions, and we included all of the criteria set forth under the off-premise signs. This, so you're aware. And
I appreciate all of the work that this obviously took.
yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
And I think it probably was a good idea for you to read that into the public record. Can I ask you to explain the differences between motion number 1 and motion number 2, just so that we have an understanding of that as we go into the pictures and the slides?
Yes, so motion number 1 is only for the US Route 15 sign, which was originally shown on the screen as sign number 1. And then-
And motion 2 is then granting is a motion to approve modifications to the variance for the variance request 3 and 4.
yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And
I
then,
just wanted to make sure, because I was looking at it, trying to compare them, and
yep. And then the third motion would be for the variance.
variance
Yeah,
number 5.
exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And please jump in if any of you others have questions as we go through.
Okay. And that's staff's presentation, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you. If we could continue with the presentation of the visual presentation by the applicant.
Hello. My name is Tara Ponteseca. I'm with Expedite the Deal. We are the applicant. Thank you for reading that staff report and for also displaying this so perfectly nice and big so everybody can see it. I would like to address and sort of speak back to some of your comments, but before I do that, may I read, I'd like to tackle the criteria in our words into the record. And I would like to apologize in advance if some of it is redundant as I go through. But I am going to read that into the record first. So, excuse me 1 second.
Tara, before you read that
Sure.
into the record, this is already part of the record.
Okay.
I'm just asking, is this, I'm sorry, I didn't phrase it as a question. Is this already part of the record in that these are the variance applications?
I
Okay.
believe we included the description of the project with the submittal. So it should be a hard copy, right?
Okay.
With,
So this is already in the record. You are reading it
Correct.
for the public.
correct.
Okay.
I would also
you for that correction.
suggest, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I would suggest that we go ahead and mark that as exhibit 2. The application is what we're looking at right now.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I would suggest we do that.
Let's mark that as exhibit 2 then, please.
May I?
You may. Go ahead.
Okay, so first variance criteria, which is listed as A, that there are no exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions relating to this proposal. Well, this lot is unique in that it's fronted by 2 roadways. The topography here is not flat, and there are mature trees on nearby lots. This irregularity is not common, and it creates a visibility hardship for motorists when unfamiliar with this destination. The parcel sits below road grade at a busy intersection. The frontage along Taneytown Pike State Route 140 is over 1,500 feet in length. The frontage along State Route 15 is approximately 500 feet in length. This is not a signalized intersection, but rather a highway exit with an overpass that blocks the view for southbound traffic to be able to identify their destination, while northbound traffic will be using the sign to prepare for their exit. The lot is uniquely positioned at the exit and surrounded by mature trees. And then criteria B, physical circumstances or conditions relating to this. Now, this property is being developed as a fuel center and convenience store. The fuel center and convenience store require adequate signage for transient motorists to include semi-tractor trailers. Due to the time that is required for a tractor trailer to be able to make their entry to this lot, adequate signage on both property frontages is necessary for the logistics of vehicular traffic flow. This property is unique, and any kind of commercial development at this property would require signs along both street frontages. This property has multiple points of entry and unique physical conditions that would require additional signage for any reasonable use at a major intersection that has poor visibility. And then C, which would be that authorizing such a variance would not be of substantial detriment. The signs are necessary for the welfare of motorists that are traveling here. US 15 is a multi-lane interstate roadway which connects to the Taneytown Pike State Route 140. It is important for all drivers to be able to navigate their way safely. Signage is what allows them to make informed decisions at posted speed limits within reasonable amounts of time. The variance as proposed and as requested will not be detrimental to the character of the zone and adjacent properties. This is a commercial zone. Other commercial properties do exist here. The appellant wishes to develop a large commercial lot, and in order to successfully do that, adequate signage is necessary for this corner lot. To the south, the properties are industrial, and to the north, the property is also zoned for commercial use. To the west is the highway, and to the east is rural vacant farmland. Fuel pricers are directional in nature and necessary for tractor trailers to identify the location of diesel fuel. The presence of a fuel price sign is a universal symbol to all motorists that indicates fuel is sold here. The signage proposed is the minimum necessary for this location to have adequate signage. The proposal is for 2 ground signs that cannot be seen from the same vantage point. The variance sign area, sign height, and the message centers at a location where the ground sign needs to be visible with current topography that is not flat, with mature trees and roadways that are established and the posted speed limits. This signage is consistent with the character of the surrounding properties and will promote the public interest by facilitating safe ingress and egress to the property from adjoining roadways. I'd like to speak to some of your points, if I may. First of all, I would like to compliment the fact that you laid out this visual scene behind us with the green tape. I think this is really good for somebody to be able to get a concept of maybe the width of the signs and the scale of the signs. However, in my professional opinion, I feel that this demonstration is a bit out of context because we are standing in a room stationary, looking at this demonstration, which is not the context in which the signs would be utilized. When you're traveling on a major roadway going 55 miles an hour with all different conditions that we cannot control, only God can control, if it's raining, if it's snowing, if there's traffic, our proposal considers all of that. So to be sure that we are enforcing safety and that somebody can safely identify that there is a gas station or a convenience store local, which you did say in your staff report. I just want to point to one section. On your staff comments on sign 1, comment A, you do acknowledge that based on data used to craft the sign code, that staff found that larger signs are needed on roadways with higher speeds in order for travelers to safely read the sign. So we're on the same page in terms of the fact that it should be larger for safety reasons. And then for staff comment on sign number 2, your number 2, you state that a sign height of 15 feet would not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property. But when I read that, the first thing that came to mind was it could be a detriment to a motorist. If the sign is only 15 feet high and too small, making it not legible for somebody traveling on this road. I brought something with me. I'm asking if I can submit it into the record or as evidence. Let me see. Bear with me, please. Can I be excused to just grab something?
Sure.
So when signs are designed before they even get to the point where we bring them to the city, we follow the United States Sign Council guidelines, which are guidelines that talk very extensively and in excruciating detail about how the stopping distances, the speed limits, the height of the vehicles. For scale, I believe the average height of a tractor trailer is 13 feet. So if you keep that in mind, that would be taller than the ceiling, or maybe just about the ceiling height. So now, when you keep that in mind and you have a tractor trailer traveling that's at that height, now all of a sudden the sign demonstration here seems proportionate. So the United States Sign Council has this fabulously put together demonstration about letter heights. It calls attention to the case, to the fonts, to the inches that the letters and the numbers need to be on a sign for it to be effective. And to speak very generally, I'm not from this area. And if I were an example of a typical motorist traveling, I would not be able to even read that sign legibly if it was scaled down to 15 feet. If I were running low on gas, I would not even be able to prepare for my stop. And that might seem like a typical scenario. Well, okay, that happens. But no, what if it's raining? What if it's snowing? What if we have children in the car? What if we are in distress? So these are the scenarios that I would love if the board would consider when viewing our proposal of the 35-foot and the 50-foot sign version. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, before we, I have no problem with submitting that as an exhibit. I'd like to know who the United States Sign Council is funded by. I assume it's an association.
Yes, I'm not sure who funds it.
I mean, I would feel more comfortable accepting it as an exhibit with that information, just to know who's behind it.
I can speak on it in terms of, I know that generally all sign designers will refer to this when making their proposals. But I do not know who funds it.
Okay.
If I can jump in, do you have additional copies?
I only brought the one copy.
Is it available electronically?
I believe if it's Googled,
Okay.
yeah.
I have no problem admitting it as an exhibit, but can we ask that the sponsor of this be found out? And make that an addition to the exhibit as described? Because I'm just not comfortable if it's an association that's funded by the Exxon and Mobil.
Fair enough.
You know, I mean, you just gotta know who's behind these things.
So we can admit it as exhibit 3 because that's just an exhibit. That doesn't mean it is relied upon or not relied upon. It's just in the record. In terms of finding out additional information, if we don't have it on hand with us, I don't think that there's a way we can do that right now.
Okay. Gentlemen, discussion?
Yeah, I have a number of questions. You wanna go next?
You want to look at it? Forgot how far
I
this
do.
goes out.
I wasn't sure that I was. Now that I've gone through numerous times, page by page, so I feel very comfortable with that. But I do have another periodical here. It lists the authors, and it's all about intersection sight distance requirements for large trucks. And there are formulas here that are used universally and sizes. So would that make you feel comfortable? There is an author here.
Let's make a decision on this one first.
Sure.
And then we'll move to that one. Did you want to look at it, or do you have any? Okay, do you have any issue with adding this as an exhibit with the caution that we have no idea who's funding this or subscribing it? All right, let's do that then. Exhibit C.
I believe we were using numbers.
Oh,
So 3.
good. 3. Thank you. So this would be exhibit 3. Did you want us to look at it now for any reason in particular?
I would invite you to thumb through, and
Okay.
there are some charts there that I believe I highlighted.
Let me-
Apologies for not making more than one copy.
That's okay. Let me just. Boy, some of this is Greek to me. But it might become important. Thank you. All right, that's exhibit 3. All right, Wayne, your question?
Yeah, I have a number of questions. One is on your
There we go.
Yeah, Wayne Slaughter. I'm a 21-year resident of this town, and I used to commute back and forth to Baltimore to work for the federal government. I did that for 17 and a half years, and 65-mile route each way and all that.
Right.
So in all kinds of weather. So I'm very familiar with the concerns that you've expressed. It would be my argument that drivers on 15 are more routine than exceptional, meaning that they know the exits and they know where the gas stations are. So I don't think that the kind of planning and concerns that you have for such a circumstance is going to be the norm. I think it would be unusual. Although there will be people, there'll be first-time drivers, I recognize that. And those concerns are valid in that sense. But the vast majority of people commuting on that know where the gas stations are, and they know roughly how to get into them, how to prepare for them. The other thing is that if you drive up and down 15, there's a Sheetz in Thermont that's located just below 15 itself. It kind of goes on a rise for what it's worth. I think what is it? It's 806 or whatever. No, the Sheetz is at 550, excuse me. And then there's another one in Gettysburg, and that's at 97. Neither of them have signs that are any more than about 10 or 15 feet, and they're not even on 15. So they're not in that situation. I mean, they're having to deal with the same problems, but they're not relying upon street signage in the major roadway in order to address it. So I would assume that being that they're your competitors for what it's worth, they must have had these same concerns, and they just seem to be doing fine without those signs. Follow me?
Yes, may I comment?
Sure.
I don't feel comfortable making assumptions about them because I can't, standing here in this room, verify the size height, and I definitely don't want to ballpark it for this argument. So I personally am not comfortable speaking to them,
Okay, that's fine.
but we've made our own research, and this is really from our perspective of that research.
Okay. Also, if you drive up and down there, the road direction and speed limit signs, virtually every other sign on there is about 10 feet. There's some exceptions, like Burger King has a rather high standing sign, but other than that, the vast majority of all the directional signs are 10 feet or so. And I'm just ballparking that number. It looks about 10 feet. So I'm assuming that the state had to think its way through these same issues for what it's worth, because these are issues that are going to impact drivers and road safety and et cetera. And so turning left, turning right, these street signs that indicate, what the streets are, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of that needs to be visible. And they seem to accept something like about 10 feet. The other thing is we just don't have street signs that are there, business signs that are that large around here at all. I mean, the vast majority of everything is 10 feet or less. So I guess this to us, or at least to me, seems like a very exceptional request. And I'm not entirely sure that the argument behind it is based upon anything that you can prove. In other words, that if your sign height was 15 feet, that your business would be adversely affected as opposed to 20 feet or 25, or you're requesting something as high as 50. I don't think that you can demonstrate that. So I would like to know where you're pulling this from. So I get a sense of, well,
Sure.
why 50 feet?
Sure.
When nobody else seems to be that bothered by it. And that's why I brought up the Sheetz
Right.
example down there, because they're clearly a competitor.
Right.
The final thing is there's an Exxon station on 140, which is Main Street as it goes into town, and 15. That is probably, I pumped gas as a teenager for what it's worth in the early 70s. That is one of the busiest gas stations I've ever seen in my entire life. And it's right down the street from where I live. They don't have any signage on 15 whatsoever. They get most of their traffic from people that know where they are and they go there. And the reason that they go there is because it's cheaper there than it is across the border in Pennsylvania. That to me, I think, is the biggest determinant, what you're selling the price of gas for, and et cetera, and whether or not it's a station that people like to frequent. I don't think that you're going to lose any business in any meaningful way by having a reduction in the size of the sign to what's being recommended. I really don't. I'd have a hard time believing that. So if there's something that you think is convincing that you can present, I'd like to see that.
Sure. So there's two things. First, I would like to introduce to the board, if you don't know that he's here, his name is Tim. He is the Rutters engineer, and he is 100% qualified to speak on the site specifically. As far as what I can comment on from what you said, first of all, your perspective is valuable. You're a local, and I appreciate hearing your perspective. And I would imagine that the public would also appreciate hearing your perspective. So thank you for sharing that. One thing you said was that you don't believe the business would be adversely affected. The goal with these signs isn't necessarily, if you notice, it doesn't say Rutters on there. This isn't an advertising sign. This sign is intended to be large enough to be proven visibly legible at the posted speed limit based on the research that they've cited during the design process, not based off of assumptions from people like you or I. Instead, they have to refer to data when they create these signs and propose the heights. So that would be what I would say that is the argument from this perspective, is that it's a measurement. It's like we said here, this seems enormous, but at 55 miles per hour, that's what they've determined is adequate. Sure.
I have an additional thought. Thank you for your questions and your discussion. I too have been around, longtime resident, 30 years. And part of the character of the town is not having large, overpowering signs that illuminate. The way that I personally drive, and that I think is important to recognize, is the highway signs that are on the state highway that say gas, food. It has the name of the business right there. And I know I personally rely on those when I'm traveling, and those I'm sure have been set back and looked at data in terms of how far you need to set those out so that somebody can prepare to make a turn before the exit. I mean, it's usually at least a mile or two ahead of time, and sometimes it'll say, exit 22A or something, so that you can prepare. And I would also question the validity of saying that it's going to damage your business when, in addition to those signs that are put up on the highway, there's also many apps that will ding you, local gas station coming up, or, I mean, I use those apps and I'm not very app friendly. So I'm just not hearing the validity that your business would be damaged by not having the
No.
sign that's big, and the safety of the motorists, because most motorists are going to depend on the highway signs that identify different kinds of gas, food, etc. So
Thank you. The only thing that I heard you say that I just want to clarify is we're not here today to ensure that the business isn't affected in a negative way. This is specifically geared towards the safety of motorists, without assuming they're local, without assuming that they know the roads, without assuming that they have apps or access to technology. And we can't assume they're not in distress. We can't assume they're not in snow or rain. So this presentation and this proposal is from that perspective, because we could be putting lives in danger, and perhaps there's a difference of opinion somewhere in the room, but we feel from our perspective, we don't wish to put lives in danger or have any safety issues created by the fact that our sign isn't large enough. If you've ever been stuck without gas, that's a problem. If you've ever been in a low visibility highway, that's a problem. So these, I think, are the things that are considered mainly. But I'm happy to definitely have heard your feedback.
okay, thank you. Levi, do you have any questions?
Tara, just thank you for being here, obviously, and excited for, I'm a new resident to Emmitsburg in 2019. So I appreciate you wanting to do business in Emmitsburg for sure. And being a university administrator, I'm sure some college students will enjoy having another business like this. And maybe someone can clarify to me, because I'm not quite sure, where is and I should know this, but I can't quite see it. Where is the location of the Rutters going to be in comparison to where the signs are, and how, and what's the importance to show directionally where the business is going to be?
May I tag in Tim, who is our engineer, to
Yeah.
speak to the layout of the property?
Amy, if you could please change it to page 1 or 2 of the attached here. That's fine right there. Well, Tim, I don't think they're going to be able to hear you, so we can get you a pointer. Amy, do you have the pointer he can use? Just want to make sure the public can hear you.
So our site is bounded by 140, the 140 interchange, and US 15. And the way that the the property, the topography of the property is, there's a drainage divide that separates our site, and that goes right down through here. The one thing, and I certainly drive 15 quite a bit, and I understand the points that you made regarding sheets at Thermont as well as Gettysburg. The one thing that they do have that we don't have is better visibility. From our standpoint, we have the drainage divide that goes down through there, and that is surrounded by forest conservation area. So our visibility is further restricted. I know when I'm driving 15, I look down and I'm on top of sheets, and I'm looking down and I see that. So from that standpoint, what we're trying to do is, because our building is not necessarily going to be the thing that attracts you, is signages to help you identify that, yes, we are here and here's a location that to serve the public. The
location of the convenience store is right there, right?
right there.
Yeah.
Correct.
The one with the writing on it. I
Yep,
think writing.
that is the
Okay.
building. And like I said, one of the difficulties we have from visibility is we have the creek that goes behind us, and that's primarily all along that's a wooded area. So our visibility of the building is not ideal for us.
So those are parking spaces for tractor trailers, right?
This is tractor trailer parking.
Okay.
This is regular car parking. And what's shown, so just, you probably are not familiar with the site plan as well as the planning commission and town council would be, but as this is shown, this is our property line. This property over here is owned by State Highway Administration. So the long-term goal, and I'm not sure of the time frame with SHA, but we are actually having an easement to get through their property into ours, and they would be building a park and ride facility on their piece of ground.
Madam Chair, can I speak on behalf of the safety aspect?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to kind of clarify, this sign ordinance was drafted in 2019 and was accepted by the Board of Commissioners. When we were researching it, we worked very closely with Maryland Municipal League and the American Planning Association. And with that, our research led us to craft this off-premise sign regulation, which we're recommending that this go off of.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if you have your code handy, but page 224-119, if I can enter into the record as exhibit 5, I think, Ruin.
Mhm. I have it.
It states that, we have different posted speed limits. So not recommendations, the maximum sign areas. So posted speed limit less than 35 should have a maximum sign area of 60 square foot. Posted speed limit of 36 to 45 should have a maximum sign area of 100 square foot, and then a posted speed limit between 46 and 55, which we're in this range right now, should have a maximum of 150 square foot. And we just didn't come up with those, off the top of our head. We did a lot of research, and we got those numbers based on scientific data from the Outdoor Advertising Association of America and the Institute of Outdoor Advertising. So, there is thought process behind those maximum sizes. And
Mhm.
in our research, it shows that those sizes at those speed limits are safe for motorists. So I just wanted to put that out there on staff's behalf of why we're recommending those maximums and why we're not recommending. The
Thank
higher.
you.
Yes.
I appreciate that in the motions, and I had checked that. I think that's good. Yeah, the safety of the motorists is important, obviously, but that has been studied. So what I'm hearing the staff say is that according to their research with the American Planning Association, which is kind of the chief guardians, along with the Highway Safety Council, you said, all right, that they find that this sign area is big enough. So I just wondered if you had any comments on that.
Regarding that, I would defer to Tara. I'm not sure how the United States Sign Council versus the APA or any other, what their differences are, how they view things.
There is one thing. Tim, could you speak to?
Could you come to the microphone? Thanks.
And if
That way we can make sure that everybody can hear.
I
it
could
on the
just
record.
clarify the exhibit,
Mhm.
please, 224-19 and also page 224-20. That includes both of my, what I was speaking about.
Mhm.
Zach, could you read the actual code section
Yes.
rather than the page number?
Section 173880. And then the page numbers 224.19 and 224.20.
And this is referring to the alternate that you are suggesting in the motions to ask for revisions in the variances that are being requested. I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure that that it's in the record that that is what you were referring to when he's referring to subdividing the property and making those off-premise signs.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Correct, and I understand, and I think essentially from the way that this property lays out, it lays out kind of along the terms of off premises versus on premises.
So other comments, questions, or would you like to go through the rest of your presentation? I would like to see the rest of it.
Well, I just have, Tim, can you speak to it all the standard sizes that are used at other locations that you've been involved with?
Certainly our signs, they vary based upon location. If we're along the lines of some of the things that Zach had mentioned is if we're on.
I'm sorry, Tim, can you come a little closer to the
Sure.
microphone? We just need to make sure.
In
Thank you.
community locations where we're not on a highway or highway frontage and we have visibility, we are smaller in size. Basically, our signs scale with basically the surrounding highways. They vary from 15 feet to 35 feet, and we have some pylon signs as high as 75 feet. So it is a function of the roadway speeds and the visibility and our distance from the roadways.
As well as, and I'd like to point out, this is an exciting project for our town. So I did want to agree with Levi on that.
Yes.
But your signs also vary based on the existing community, the landscape surrounding that community and what the community wishes to carry forth into the future in terms of its look and its visibility, and in addition to its helpfulness, but it does vary according to the community.
Certainly, and all communities have their own governance and guidance, and certainly that's one of the reasons why we're here this evening seeking variance from that.
Mhm. Thank you.
There's just a few things I'd like to say. I'd like to speak to and point your attention to the intention again of the sign. I think one of you had mentioned there's a Burger King sign locally that's quite tall. It's a pylon. Keep in mind that would be a logo. That would be for brand reinforcement and recognition. That does far more than present information that is useful to a motorist in a life or death scenario, which is driving. The intention of this sign, again, as stated, is to show the fuel prices. But see where it says, oh, can we turn to page 4?
Amy, if you could just go down, please.
So if you look at this, this is obviously a static image printed on a page, and it says soft drinks. That is a digital EMC unit, which serves many purposes, and it is not specifically to demonstrate that this business, shielded behind many trees, sells liquids. That sign can be programmed to demonstrate any information, including potentially community messages, emergency messages. If there is another pandemic and there is a scenario in which there is a pertinent message that needs to be displayed to the public on behalf of Rutters, that the beauty of that technology is that it can do that. It's not a static soft drink image. I'd like to have just clarified that. And also to remind the board that there is no logo here. We are not pushing for a large sign in order to get our logo strewn across the highway for selfish business reasons. The intention behind the proposal is true safety. I do appreciate your acknowledgement that you have done research and that there was research put into the code, and that is highly respectable because many cities would have never have brought that information to light. But like I said, when these were designed, it was off of their research, potentially being drawn from other locations in which they have installed smaller or larger signs. I also would like to acknowledge the beauty of the community, and that being a huge piece of this for residents and for the board, because to have your landscape disrupted by a sign, you would want to make sure that it's a sign that's adequate. And that is why I brought up the logo and the fact that we're not disrupting the landscape to plaster our logo anywhere. And then also to just echo what Tim said is that we don't have the benefit here of the building being visible. Now I know this isn't developed yet, but I obviously took a ride over there today to try to get my bearings. And I was doing U-turns in people's driveways because I couldn't figure out, it took me a little time to figure out where this would actually be. And with that said, even when the building is developed, that could be a scenario somebody could find themselves in and not be able to safely locate this facility. But with that said, I've submitted and I've spoken our side of things in terms of the criteria. And I'd like to remind the board of context of seeing visuals like behind us. There is one other thing I'd like to touch on. I'm not sure if you'd accept this, but as I was traveling here, I traveled through Pennsylvania and I traveled on 15 for quite some time. And there was a Rutters that I had passed, and it happened to be at an intersection, and I did photograph it. And I know ball parking is dangerous, as we just talked about, but sitting at a red light saying, oh, look, a Rutters, it's quite a large sign. I couldn't read it. And I took a photo of it and I asked him, what size do you think this is? And again, pontificating sizes, can't prove anything. But even at a stop, I could not read that sign. So I'm not sure if I'm allowed to present a digital photo to you, if maybe you'd be interested in considering that.
Is it just a digital photo?
I mean, I could email it from my phone to somebody, but I took it on the way here, so.
And the purpose of the photo would be to.
It's for context.
What evidence or?
It would be the evidence of safety and visibility for context of size, to show how that size sign, which is well over 15, is still not visible at across an intersection at a stop.
My argument would be if you can't tell if you can tell the context on a phone, why can't you tell the context on the back of the wall? That's my
Yeah,
question.
I'm really not seeing that it would add any additional information to
Okay,
go through that.
sure. I wanted to bring it up anyway.
I-
Yeah.
I will say this, if you want to submit it, because I think one of the things that we get a little bogged down here is submitting something versus relying on something. So our rules in terms of submissions, it's fair game. If you wanted to submit the photograph and you could do so in a reasonable fashion, and while we're sitting here right now, that's fine. I think I'm hearing that it might not be relied upon,
Right.
but if you want to submit it, that is something you can do.
That's, I guess that would be the same with any of the exhibits that we're taking in, which is why we're trying to take in as much information as we can.
That's correct. I'm trying to make the very
Clarify.
And I appreciate the clarification.
pedantic procedural point of the exhibits. So
Yep, I do appreciate that. So,
My logic, just being in the business of the photo and potentially why I feel it may be useful. And you had just said, well, why is that context proper? And this isn't, and it's because I was in a motor vehicle in a roadway with setback, with other cars, with the conditions in which somebody would experience this sign versus this is nowhere near the condition. No offense, it's beautiful, but it's not the condition in which we would experience the sign. And I think it gives a false, it's like looking at a skyscraper up close and how big it is versus when you're 3 blocks over. I don't think it's the right vantage or scale. So if allowed, I would like to submit it. Is there an email address I can do that?
do you have a suggestion, possibly emailing it to you?
Yeah.
Zach?
It would be to me. Do you have my email?
Not on this phone. Can I give it to you to type in?
I
Oh,
probably
it's
yeah.
COVID. It's COVID. Okay.
Z Golden.
Give me 1 second. ZGO.
GU.
It's on the,
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
And then that's at Emmitsburg
Um,
MD.gov.
Great.
And for the record, what's the size of that sign?
Cannot confirm, but what I can say is that I believe it to be above 15 feet in height.
And was that located in Dillsburg, Pennsylvania? Or was that
where
Heidlersburg,
did-
Pennsylvania?
I'm not sure.
Because the only Rutters I know of on 15 is Dillsburg and Heidlersburg. So was it on 15 you said? I'm sorry.
It was, yeah, but about 45 minutes from here. I remember looking at my GPS saying I'm pretty far from you. Okay.
Yeah, I'm from Pennsylvania. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I just emailed it.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
call that Exhibit 6.
thank you.
Um,
Oh, may I speak to one more point?
Yes,
I believe in the staff report, it was mentioned in his comments that there are only 2 other properties which would have the same criteria that our site meets. Yeah, it says only 2 on, I'm sorry, Staff comments on sign number 1 and his letter A.
Mhm.
Only 2 other lots meet this criteria, which are directly north of this property. And the concern of staff was to not set improper precedents or, you don't want this to become normalized.
Right.
I would like to just reiterate that there's only 2 other locations that would even meet this criteria, that this hopefully would not affect the town as a whole.
Okay, noted. Thank you. I'd like to ask the staff a question. And it's about the State Highway Administration signs that are placed on the highway.
Sure.
And that do have logos indicating gas, Exxon, Rutters, food, Exxon, Rutters, whatever the food is, et cetera. Those signs would have had to have been studied for visibility in terms of accessibility to turn at that exit, correct?
I would agree with
I'm-
that statement.
I'm assuming.
I'm assuming the same thing.
Okay, but we don't know for sure.
We don't know for sure.
May I comment on that when you're done?
Yes.
My comment to that is, I would compare them to like DOT signs, right? The regulated standard that we see everywhere.
Mhm.
Those sign types that we're speaking about, you usually get a few of them leading up. So the motorist has multiple opportunities to prepare. And I rely personally very heavily on these signs, so I know. Whereas what we're proposing, you have one shot before you have to continue down that highway. So in the event of an emergency, the other thing to point out about those signs is it's typically logos that are displayed, which is years of masterful branding. So you'll have Starbucks, whereas that's really what I think the eye is, just that marketing programming sees that little 2 foot by 2 foot, and that's enough. We are programmed throughout the country, the United States, to expect those signs. Whereas a private location like ours, we have one shot to make sure we get it right and make sure people are traveling safely and reaching their destination.
Madam Chair, I have a question for the applicant if possible.
Yes.
So from your presentation, the soft drink, it's going to change. So you're saying it's never going to say Rutters?
I'm not exactly sure, Zach, but it is reasonable to expect that at some time it does.
Can I ask a question related
sure.
to that? I would just, for the sake of hypothetical here, I would question the value of a very large sign like that advertised something about a soda pop or anything else, and even had some cost of gasoline without any kind of attribution to a particular brand name. In this case, Rutters or whatever. If I'm driving, I want to know if I'm going to pull over and get gas, where am I going to get it? To see something that says, what do you want to call it, as nondescript as that would do me no good. Chances are I wouldn't even pull over for that. So I realize that's a weak example, but in presenting it to us, I don't see that there's any messaging there that's of value to your company. I have no idea why you'd display something like that, to be honest with you. You'd chase me away. I wouldn't pull in there unless I was absolutely desperate. So I have kind of a problem with this example, and I do believe that it will say Rutters on it. So you're hedging your bets, but I believe it will say Rutters, and it properly should. So there you go. To me, it will be your brand name, and it will show your gas prices and all of that at one point or another. And so what's the value of that?
And I will go through, and I'm kind of making a mental note here. I drive by a sign on my travels, and I actually did this past weekend. And it's a sign that actually is visible for a mile and a half. And it did have Rutters on it. I couldn't tell you, did I see Rutters on it cycle through twice or three, but I do know that it does have Rutters.
Mhm.
So there's benefits, and there's the point being that the intention of the sign is to present the information that you would need in an emergency scenario as a motorist, not to cater to the fact that this is an advertising opportunity. However, brand recognition is important. And with that in mind, as they choose their graphics and design their graphics, certainly Rutters might be mentioned, but the sole purpose of this sign is not to be a billboard to advertise the Rutters name. But something else to point out is, since we've kept this screen up, this is just for the one roadway. The other proposal on page 6 we have on the cladding there, the red acrylic strips, which is a bit of branding in terms of recognition, brand colors. If you think of other companies like AutoZone and things, you start to get to know. So that's how they've incorporated it here. But this is for a 35-foot sign versus a pylon, which when designing that 50-foot, I'm sorry, the 50-foot sign that we just looked at, now it becomes a balancing act between, we need it to be high and visible, but we don't want it to be a spectacle. So I can't speak for sure to that element, but I do want to acknowledge what you had said. And also that we do incorporate some bit of branding in this lower height sign here on this road.
So a question, and I know I keep coming back to these
That's
highway
okay.
signs that to me are unobtrusive, attractive, and very informational, that have the brand, what it is they're selling, and they also have diesel written on them. I know it'll say gas, but it'll also say diesel on the bottom of some of those, which I think is very important for people to know. I'm not saying we don't want people to know where you are. We just want to make sure that we do the best job of making sure that it blends in with who and what our community is. So are you saying that a state highway sign here that says gas, diesel, Rutters, that would not give people the information to turn into the Rutters on the left?
See, I personally can't speak to those, or if there's any intention to have those, or for Rutters to be included on one of those. I can only speak to this because I don't know.
Okay, let me ask the question, because I don't know how that happens either. Do people pay to get on those signs? Is there a process?
I would actually defer that to Tim. He's probably been in that situation a lot
Do you
more.
know?
I don't specifically know about the state of Maryland, because our other store is not, that we currently operate, is not in a location that those are available to. I can only speak in kind of in reference to Pennsylvania. And yes, we do participate in that program. I do believe it's not a free program. I believe that we pay for that. I don't know what the charges would be. And typically in the state of Pennsylvania, there are guidelines which you have to meet to be able to utilize those.
To be open a certain number of hours?
Well,
and stuff?
that and more so proximity, because they don't want, typically in Pennsylvania, you have to be within 1 mile of an interchange, because they don't want it to be one of those things where, well, okay, now we've got somebody 4 miles down the road. These signs no longer serve their purpose because they're supposed to be highway attractions.
Right.
So.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I have one
Yes.
question for Zach. Just so we're all on the sort of same page here and we're discussing this fairly. There's a gas station on the south side of town. Is it Varello or something? Is that it?
Oh, sure.
They
Along
have
US
a high
50.
sign advertising their name, their brand. Also across the street, Holtzopel has a rather large sign too, far exceeding what's in your sign reg. So just so you're aware, I mean, there's existing, call it contradiction here. And I think we should probably spend a moment talking through that so that we all understand. Why is it that we would allow something like that to exist? And we would deny them an opportunity to have something comparable?
Sure. So I think the simple answer to that is that's in Frederick County. It's actually not in the town boundaries. So Frederick County Council has their own set of regulations regarding signage. I'm not sure how up to date that is, but the town decided, the commissioners and the mayor decided that, that type of sign, that size sign is not appropriate for the town of Emmitsburg.
All right, so it's actually outside of our sort of jurisdictional boundary.
That's correct.
Okay, good enough.
I have a question.
Thank you. That's a
Mhm.
good question too.
Looking at this sign, would you say that this sign is like the entrance way into the gas station? Like onto your property?
From a site perspective, that's in the vicinity of the entrance, yes.
Okay.
So is that where I would turn to go into Rutters? I guess.
Yeah, that's a good question.
You go
yeah.
back
Yeah.
to the site.
Amy, if you go back to the site plan, please. There we go.
So as you're approaching it, it's between the ramp and the
Mhm.
driveway.
Okay.
So as you come off the ramp, you come up here is a four-way stop on
Yeah.
40.
Right.
Ramp. And then here's our driveway. So it's about halfway in between. So you're approaching it, if you're approaching it from the westbound side, you see it before you get to the
Mhm.
entrance. If you're approaching it from the eastbound side, it's after.
But you should be able to see it as you're approaching the gas station, right? Or is it because of the tree line?
You should be able to see this sign on 140. You should be able to see it from both directions.
Mhm.
Okay, I was misinformed then. In my mind, I was seeing that sign on the other side of 140, which is not correct. It's
Mhm.
on your side.
It's
of
on our
140.
side, yes.
Okay,
I have a quick question. Maybe you just stated it and it went over my head.
that's all right.
Do these signs have a front and back to them? In other words, going west, you can read it, and then coming east or whatever, going east, you can read it.
Yes, it's two-sided, displaying the
So
same
you're
thing.
appealing to both directions.
Correct.
coming and Going with one sign. Okay.
I guess my personal opinion, if that is, and looking at the staff comments, if that is a entrance sign, are you gonna have another gas sign anywhere on the facility?
Once you enter the property, you'll have opportunity to see the canopy and you'll see the convenience store.
But is that number 2 sign, is that to tell me how much gas is as I enter?
Well, we're regulated. We have to also follow state regulation. I believe it's state regulation or federal.
Both sign 1 and 2 would be identifying prices as well as identifying at the pump themselves.
Right.
So, but both signs have the same exact information, the way they're portrayed in here.
They are capable, and I don't know, I can't state with certainty that the same messages are being displayed on the 2 signs simultaneously.
I'm not worried about that. I'm just, if I'm driving, just take 15 out of it. Cause if I'm coming from, my wife and I go to Panera all the time. So we would see the sign all the time, coming from where we're at. I'm just trying, if I'm coming from Taneytown or I'm coming from Main Street, if I saw that sign, I would know that the Rutters is in that area somewhere.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
I did have the question about the 2 signs being the same. And I would like to ask you specifically about your statement that you saw that the state of, I don't know if you said the state would use it, but that you would use it for emergency signage if Rutters wanted to say an emergency message?
It's my understanding that this sign type has the capability of displaying community messages if requested. So if that was something, let's say you wanted to propose that in the event of an emergency, Rutters should display said message, that might be something we could do.
Madam Chair, that's actually a requirement in our code that this be, so for example, if a child was missing, we would send out a message to Rutters and they would actually be required by code to put that on their sign.
I never saw that and was not aware of it and hadn't heard of any other jurisdiction putting that in their code. So that's something new that I learned.
Yeah, we added that in 2019.
Thank you, by the way.
No, this is important kind of information and I'm sorry that I missed it in the code.
It's a large code, so.
That's true. This thing is mega to get up the steps. I honestly didn't know that. So thank you for that.
Can we go back to the highway signs for a
yes.
second? Adding another gas station in similar proximity, because you got one going, I guess, west Main towards Exxon. I guess it's now Seneca or
Sure.
if it would it be important for the town? I don't know how these highway signs are. Would it be important for the town to promote multiple gas stations like that or provide opportunities for both? Depending on how those highway signs are purchased or.
Sure. So,
Only fair.
right. So in our sign code, Sunoco would have every opportunity to, if approved tonight, put a off-premise sign 750 square or 750 linear feet away from this one. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, they could purchase an area south of this, north of this, and put a sign maximum 150 square feet, 15 feet tall.
Yeah, I didn't, was your question related to like the highway attraction signs or independent signs like we're talking about?
Well, I just think of my interview in March of 2019. I had no idea where everything was. And so signage like that would be, highway sign would probably be beneficial for those that don't know where gas is. I came from Taneytown, so I could see it, but coming from 15, it's kind of hard to see. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, and for a fairness aspect, that's why we recommended that 150 square foot, 15 foot tall for, equity.
So then we could also have Getty's doing the same thing
Correct.
and the other one. Okay,
Lots of signs.
that's lots of signs. Lots of signs. All right. Are there any other questions of the applicant right now?
None here.
And I just want to make sure that I'm correct on my definition of message sequencing, which you said is prohibited. That's not, I thought it was a message like flashing, like, Rutters 1 minute and then hot dogs the next minute. And that's not what you mean by message sequence.
Correct. So basically what it means is the rudder sign would fade out, over the sign length. So if it's 10 foot, they'll slowly go like this into a new message. So it just keeps continuing messages.
That's what's prohibited.
Correct.
But flashing from one picture to another picture, is that prohibited as well?
Right. So we do have rules and regulations for that in the sign code as well. And I did include that in the motion. So basically we're requesting that everything as an off-premise sign be added to this so they can't flash every couple seconds. We actually have a formula in our code, which will work.
Could you
Yes,
point me to that on your suggested motion? I
absolutely.
must have missed it.
Just give me a couple seconds, please.
Okay.
Yes, so it's going to be number 9, page 6 in the staff memo. The following illumination types shall be permitted. And then it goes into the digital display sign. So I didn't specifically, oh, hold on a second. Here we go. Here we go. D, the length of each message of the Tri-Vision board may be displayed, which changing based on the visibility and posted speed limit unique to individual signs. And then it's laid out in section 173860 F1F. So that section in the code actually states speed limits and how fast and how slow it can be changed. Does that answer your question? So Tri-Vision board
No. What page is it in the code?
on the code, 1 second.
1738?
Sure.
60. But that's in the on premises. So in your motion, you were referring to off premises, correct?
Right. So the illumination standards are set forth in section 173860, which it states off premise. However, it regulates all illumination types.
Oh, okay.
And I specifically added number 7 on page 5 of the staff memo. Additional regulations, the sign shall comply with any and all applicable zoning regulations of the town and any and all local, state, and federal regulations. In the event that any other applicable regulation is in conflict with the provision of the section, the stricter regulations shall apply. So that basically encompasses the entire sign ordinance. So those would be covered. So we're safe on that end, in my opinion.
Okay. Do you guys understand that? What he's talking about in terms of the messages? Okay. So I have to go back to this. I'm
Sure.
sorry.
It's okay. No.
I don't understand reading this chart, how that describes how many different messages could be changed at a
Let-
period of time. Can we change it every minute, every 3 minutes? Maybe I'm being too nitpicky.
Nope, it's okay.
Trying to understand it.
Let me get the
Wouldn't that be a
exact.
Safety issue. I mean, if you had something that was that distracting, drivers would be looking at it. Which is exactly what you don't want to have.
Right, I
Keep
would
your
think
eyes
you
on the road,
wouldn't.
Right? So
Exactly.
I really can't imagine that it's going to become like a kaleidoscope of imagery and all that, right? I mean, isn't that what we're talking about here? You're not planning on. turning
No,
it
this is to be thought
So,
of as a new medium. Yeah, think of this as a new medium,
Yeah.
digital paper that can just replace itself.
Right,
That's all. It won't be flashing.
Right.
Okay.
And you could even tell us, leave it every 45 seconds or
I hope
60,
it's longer than that.
60, well, at the
Right.
speed limits and
that's the point.
That's
These
my
are- these are
concern.
Right.
decisions that can be made in the best interest of the business, the community,
And
the
the
Right.
public safety. That's
Right.
it.
Okay, I actually found it. So go to page in your code book, page 224.12.
I don't have it yet.
So then it goes to F. It says message duration, and then the length of time each message shall be displayed on a message center sign, digital display, which is the case here, or Tri-Vision board is signs based on visibility and speed limit unique to the individual signs and adjacent road conditions. The following method should be used to calculate message duration for these type of signs. Do you see it, Madam Chair? Madam Chair, did you find that?
I did.
Okay, then we go into a formula, which again was, I outlined the organization Outdoor Advertising Association of America and Institute of Outdoor Advertising. They were used in order to determine this formula. So they came up with this formula and they determined that different messaging sequences or messaging changing is, that's the appropriate determination for that.
Based on the road conditions.
Correct.
Sight distance.
Correct.
And then you have these formulas. Okay. As long as I can feel comfortable that it's not going to be a flashing
Yep.
every couple minutes.
That would be prohibited.
Okay.
And that doesn't have to be in your motion. That's in the code. So,
That's in the code, so we would be safe with that.
yep.
All right. Levi, do you have any other questions of the applicant?
No, I'm good.
No questions of the applicant or staff? All right. So the recommendation by staff is, in this case, if we were taking your recommendation, we would need to go with the recommendation. And do you want us to read the entire recommendation in order to take a vote on it? Your suggested motion 1, 2, and 3.
Before we get there, can we just offer it to public comment? I know that there's no one else here right now, but
Absolutely. Thank you. Would anyone else in the public like to comment? Any other comments from the applicant?
Yes.
Okay,
I would like to, first of all, thank you. And in terms of, you mentioned wanting to know who funds the United States Sign Council Foundation. I'm unable to get you a clear and concise answer to that, except for to say, based on very quick research, they have a board of directors. And they are the leading, the industry leader in sign research since 1998.
Okay.
Thank you.
thank you.
and before I'm gonna butt in again, if I may,
Mhm.
before the board
Please,
transitions.
we have you here for a very important reason.
I just want to remind the board what is required and what its job is at this point
Statement of
before.
Facts and findings.
That's right. And the statement of facts as found in code section, and I don't have the code with me, so I don't have the page number, but the code section is 17.12.50.
Mhm.
Specifically, we're looking at subsection B. There are 3 criteria here that the board needs to make findings of fact of. I can read them briefly if you would like me to.
Let's add those to the record and for our illumination.
Okay.
There's
Um,
3.
So B1, that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes of uses in the same zoning district. B2, that such variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same zoning district and in the vicinity. And B3, that the authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purposes of this title or the public interest.
Thank you. All right. So what we would need to do is make sure that those findings of fact and conditions exist before we do anything else.
Correct.
So let's look at each one of those individually and then looking at the motion, see if we can agree that the motion answers each one of those statement of findings and facts. All right, so.
So the
Let me
applicant,
find them again.
yeah,
Wait a minute, I just had them right here.
if I made the applicant outlines how they believe that they meet the variance
In,
criteria,
right here.
right?
in the variance criteria on the description of the project.
So basically, if you don't agree with that, you would need to deny it. But if you agree with it, then you can grant variances, correct?
So whether you are going to grant the variance that the applicant is requesting or the modified variance that staff is recommending, you will need to make findings of fact in line with those three criteria.
On each one of the 5 variance requests.
Yes.
I guess we should do that for each and every one.
Yes.
So we need to look at the applicant's variance requests first and go through each of the statements of finding, each of the findings of fact for each of the variances. I want to make sure that I'm doing this in the
Sure.
right way.
So ultimately, the board is going to take a decision on
Mhm.
this application, and that decision needs to be supported by findings of fact, which we just laid through what those, what the sort of headings are
Mhm.
for each of the variances that are requested.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, but okay, do we need to look at variance 1 and say we disagree or agree because of statement of fact A, B, and C? Or can we group them together?
I would recommend going 1 through 5.
Okay, all right. So the first variance request. And if you see anything you'd rather have me do on this, let me know, because I haven't seen this many variances in anything that I've looked at previously.
Which may be all the more reason to take our time and do it methodically.
Right, make sure we have it right. I'd also like to express to the rest of the board that we can also continue this hearing if we feel like we need additional information or to do additional research. So that is another option. All right,
And the applicant can request that as well.
so that's open to the applicant. All right. Let me get that out of the way first. Does the board feel like we can make the decision tonight based on the facts and findings and the information that's been presented to us?
I think we can make a decision.
Okay, I agree. So no continuation is needed unless the applicants request it? Okay, good. All right, so the first variance, I'm trying to get to the place where it would make the most sense to read these. All right. I
So-
can summarize them as in the staff report, variance number 1.
Yes,
Okay,
page 4.
all right. I'd like to do this. Sign 1, which borders US 15. The variance request being submitted by the applicant is to exceed the maximum allowed height. The maximum height per the code is 10 feet. The requested variance is 50 feet. On the finding of that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances, which is the first statement of fact or condition, including exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or unusual shape of the property. And I'm going to read these once and then refer to them again as statement of fact 1, statement of fact 2, statement of fact 3. Exceptional topographic conditions or other extraordinary situations or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes of uses in the same district. How do we find, or do I hear a motion to accept the variance request based on that criteria? Statement of fact 1. I'm asking a motion for that question. Statement of fact 1. In other words, do we approve their request for the variance in the maximum height for an on-premise freestanding sign bordering US 15 to the height that they are requesting it. Pardon? Okay. Would you put that motion forward to approve?
No.
All right. Then I'm hearing that, oh, let's take a vote.
Well, so
We have found that we have not been able to pass a motion that they have met the statement of fact or finding for the first statement for variance number 1.
I would suggest that we not do an individual motion for each one of these.
Good, that would take forever.
Yes. So
I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this that is legally permissible in this case and makes the most sense.
right. I would suggest this. I would suggest that the board discuss what it is going to do with respect to this application.
Okay,
And then, because I think what the breakdown sort of there was, you were looking for a motion, but it was sort of then nobody wanted to put forward that motion. So I
Right.
think that the board should have some discussion, decide what it wants to do with respect to
in general.
application for variance number 1, which is sign 1's height. And once the board has decided what it's going to do, formulate a motion from there. Does that make sense?
But we would still be doing it one by one on each of the statements of findings for each of the variances.
No, I think there should be 5 motions. Variance 1, variance 2, variance 3, variance 4, variance 5. The findings of fact in support of the findings of fact are just the reason why the board votes the way it does on each of those motions, because each of
Okay.
those motions is the variance that is being brought before the board.
I misunderstood. I thought you said we had to vote on each of the statements of fact.
No,
and finding.
there
for
should be-
each of the variances.
5 motions, 5 votes.
Okay,
But you need to make findings that justify your decision as to each of those 5 votes.
all right.
So they're allowed to make a variance, correct?
Hmm,
Or did I just confuse things more? Just disagree or disregard?
my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that we can accept their variance requests and show why we're accepting those, or we can deny their variance requests, showing why we denied those. Then as a whole separate matter, we would come to the staff notes and the staff suggestions in which we would go through the whole process again and discuss those and whether or not we agreed with those.
If you are going to accept staff's suggestion, I don't think we need to go through this exercise more than once. For variance number 1, you can discuss what they've put forward and you can discuss what staff has put forward.
Oh, okay, for each of the, okay,
Yes.
all right, and staff combined its recommendations. So we'll have to,
Correct. Yeah. So you
we'll
can,
tease those out.
right.
Okay. Holy mackerel, I haven't worked so hard in a long time. All right. Let's discuss what our plan is on the variance for the height for the on-premise freestanding sign in the general B2 zoning district, the height. I personally, I'll express my opinion. I do not find grounds that the applicant has made a sufficient argument for the height of the sign. I agree that there are some no, I don't agree. I don't agree that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions to this that do not generally apply to other properties in our business district. I don't agree with number 2, that the variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the vicinity. And I think that the authorizing of a variance for that size of the height will be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will impair the public interest as stated in our sign code that was adopted by our Board of Commissioners. So I recommend that we make the motion not to accept variance number 1 to the town code.
Discussion.
Discussion.
I would, I agree with that. I do like the suggested motion that the staff has made about spacing, which is on page 4 of suggested motion 1. I think it's number 1. If the applicant wants to do a sign, I believe that it wouldn't be I don't think it would go against the code in their suggestion if they decided to do the spacing guidelines that the staff suggested. And I think the change there would be, well, I guess we're looking at the first variance where the staff allowing a 15-foot sign. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
And we are
Mhm.
recommending
Yeah.
the other conditions of approval as well, because this is not technically an off-premise sign, technically per the code. But that would provide more protections in case they would want to do an off-premise sign, then they could not have 2 large signs beside each other. So that's why we're recommending the additional, not only the spacing, but the additional as well.
And those additional conditions, since the suggested motion was addressing their variance request 1 and 2, which was the maximum sign area per code and the height.
Yeah, so it sounds like Clark would like it individual. So I apologize that I added those together,
That's okay.
but I would request that you include those conditions of approval in each of your motions, if you agree with staff's recommendation.
Excuse me, I need to
Yes.
understand, this is all procedure at this point. So what we accomplished so far was we basically did not accept their request for the variance number 1. Is that right?
That is
Are
correct.
we discussing now whether we accept the staff's proposed alternative?
Yes.
Are we gonna do that with each one of these? Is that how it's done? We look at
That's-
theirs, we
Mhm.
accept or don't, and then we decide whether we accept the staff.
Again, I'm going to say that you don't need a formal motion for theirs and for staffs. What you need is to have one motion deciding what you're going to do for each requested variance. And there's sort of 3 options. It's accept the applicant, accept staff's modification or deny outright. So you
Mhm.
need to do that for each of the 5 that were
Right,
requested.
right.
You don't need to do one for you, one for you, one for you, one for you. It's just, you need to decide
That's
how the board is going to address each of these variances
Mhm.
so.
and go from there.
I would just, in the interest of time, because I can imagine this could go on a long time. Can we follow that process in a sort of orderly way? We just look at each one of these variances, decide whether we agree with the applicant or not, and then whether we accept town.
The town alternative.
I mean.
I,
do we
Yes,
need to
yeah,
go
I thought
into a
that's what we
lengthy-
were doing.
Into a lengthy discussion with regard to each one of these?
the board needs to make findings of fact to
In each
just
case.
explain, essentially, the board needs to explain based on the evidence in the record, why it is doing what it is doing.
All right, fair enough.
So once we lay out the motion, we need to put the motion in a form that Levi can write it down and we can all agree to. We don't need to sign that tonight, do we? No. Okay, good. All right, but we need to make that. So we've discussed variance number 1. We've decided that we do not agree with granting the applicant's request for the variance. We've looked at the staff suggestion. And we agree with the staff suggestion with the conditions that are written in the staff report, which is obviously one of the exhibits. All right. And did you guys agree with the discussion that I had about the variance, the findings of fact 1, 2, and 3?
Yes, I'm not convinced that there's a need for the sign as presented by the applicant. I haven't.
Correct.
I haven't been persuaded that there's enough evidence there to warrant it. And
Okay.
I actually do believe that the staff alternative is very acceptable.
I do too, but we have to make sure that we say that there are not exceptional or extraordinary circumstances. We have to find on each one of these statements of facts and finding in order to enter it in the record properly. So, and Zach, in the could the board please hear the discussion that's occurring?
I'm sorry, for my
That's
own
okay.
clarification, I asked 2 questions. I first asked if the photo that I emailed was able to be presented to you, which referenced the height of another location. The other question, and the answer to that was no, because they don't have their computer. I have it on my phone. But the other question I asked was just for my own knowledge, if you have to choose to go with what staff recommends, what we recommend, or deny both, or if you can have your own proposal that would maybe be in a gray area of the 2. For my own knowledge, I just wanted to know.
Yes, we are permitted to make a third. We are
Right.
permitted to make our own motion based on our own judgment of the facts.
That is correct.
Okay, that's all I
I'm
need.
sorry that
Thank you.
I know why that was unclear, but
Right.
yes, that
Okay.
that is correct.
Yes, we are certainly able to do that, but thank you for bringing it up. And I just want to make sure that everything that's said in this room is said publicly so that we're not this is, we've got statements of rules and procedures. So I just needed it to be stated out loud. So thank you. So as of this point, we need to make sure that we cite each one of the statements of fact and finding. Let me just clarify that the statements of fact and finding that are in italics on this description of the project are exact repeats from the code book.
That was from the applicant. I didn't clarify that.
Okay, So we need to make sure that we're looking at our code book.
Yeah, and that would be on the
Or-
staff memo, page 2, and that is word for word for section 171250B.
Okay. Oh, there they are. Okay, so do you guys both have that? Page 2, town code variance requirements. I knew they were somewhere. All right,
And again, the statements of fact, this is just those 3 requirements based on what was presented in the evidence and at the hearing, why the board is making the determinations it is with respect to each of those 3 bullets.
right,
All right.
okay. Unless the board finds beyond reasonable doubt that all of the following facts and conditions exist. So we actually can just base it on one of the following facts and conditions.
If you are denying an application, yes, but if you are even accepting staff's recommendation, that is a variance. So if you are accepting staff's recommendation, you need to find in the affirmative as to each.
As to each one of
3.
these.
Yes.
Okay. So for the negative, what I'm hearing we're doing, we make a motion to not accept the applicant's request for the sign height variance for sign number 1 because we did not find that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question that do not generally apply to other properties or classes of use in the same zoning district. We do not find that the variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights. So we have found 2 of those already.
Correct.
Is there agreement to that? Yes. All right. So now we're looking at accepting the variance request that staff has proposed in its motion number 1.
I guess that raises the question, if you don't mind,
Mhm.
Madam Chair. Do we have an alternative that we're proposing?
If I were going to propose an alternative to this, I would have to do more research. I would request additional time to
Absolutely.
propose an alternative of my own making.
Yep.
So I think we either need to be satisfied with the conditions and the research that staff has suggested, unless we see something we want to strike.
Correct. If there's
But-
something obvious to us based on what we've heard tonight.
Right. But overall, I think that in the interest of making a decision tonight and moving this off the dime,
Right.
I think we should look at staff's comments as a
I agree.
good place to start. So looking at staff's suggested motion for the height, staff is suggesting a 15-foot maximum sign height, which is the first request for variance that we just denied the applicant, and we are looking at accepting the town staff suggestion along with the following conditions of approval. As stated forth in spacing. Number 2, vertically, and messaging would be attached to that, construction and maintenance. Even though you put these all together, Zach, I think it's really evident that they meet the sign height and the sign size. Is there any disagreement with the size sign that's suggested in variance number 2 on staff comments?
No. No.
Can you repeat that? That the applicant needs the size?
That the staff suggestion of the size is that the size be no larger than 150 square foot maximum sign area.
Which is,
And no higher than 15 feet.
yeah, and so 15 feet is the first request.
15 feet is the first request.
Yep.
150 square feet maximum sign area is the second request.
Yeah.
But we need to make the formal motion for
Mhm.
each one separately.
Yep.
So I think what we can do is make the motion for the first one,
Mm.
saying that we accept the variance, because
Mhm.
it's still a variance, of 15 feet maximum sign height with the conditions as outlined in suggested motion in the staff memo. And that variance will meet the conditions.
Yeah.
The,
And I think with that, because if looking at slide 5, I mean, you can see the sign, the way that it's presented. I mean, you can see, even though this is at 15 feet, you can see it from the distance. Now, obviously, you don't know what it says. I mean, I mean, it's hard from a picture, but you know, I would think the sign of 15 feet, even as you approach it, you're going to be able to see it as you get closer, and you're going to know to exit. And so that's why I think for the first variance, as the staff has put together, I would approve that, because it's still a sign that's readable from the road as you're approaching it. And I think the staff addresses that, but it would still allow you to exit off the highway, knowing that
Mhm.
there's that sign. So that's why I would be in favor of the motion. And I can make the motion if you would like me to, for variance 1. If you want me to make a motion, unless there's other discussion.
there's no other discussion needed
Okay.
on my part. I was making the motion, but
Oh.
it was kind of convoluted, so
Yeah.
we do need to write it down.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
think it's important that we craft it together.
Sure.
And then as we go through the other variances,
Mhm.
we can find language that will work.
Mhm.
So let's write the motion.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, actually, we
I think
could
it's writ-
accept staff motion
Mhm. Yeah. And
as is.
mhm. Yeah, because the motion would be to move conditionally to approve a variance to town code 1738-170. I think that's .3, allowing a 15-foot maximum sign height for the first variant
With the following conditions.
Correct.
with the
with
following conditions.
All the following conditions
Yep.
as stated in the staff request,
Mhm.
in the staff memo. Based on the fact that such a variance that the authorizing of such variance, and then the rest of number 3, which is right there.
Mhm.
And just the rest of that. Will that suffice?
When he has written it out, let's read it.
Okay, and make sure. We want to get this right, and we want to get it right the first time so that we can then just,
Can I ask a clarifying question that
Ab-
may simplify this?
absolutely.
So as I view it, staff has basically recommended denial of the applicant's request. Is the staff's recommendation that essentially the signs be considered off-premise signs? Is that
Correct. For sign For both of them, correct.
So,
They're not technically an off-premise sign, but the off-premise sign regulations.
correct. So I'm just thinking, if I'm reading the tea leaves that you guys are on board with staff's recommendations. So if I understand that correctly, maybe the simpler, to get to the end, you're going to deny our requests but you would approve a request to consider them off-premise signs. Is it?
With the shortened height, with the height.
Well,
And-
that is the criteria of the
Right.
off-premise sign, right?
Mhm. Yes.
I think we're getting to the same place. We just may get there quicker. But if you see it differently or you all see it differently, on my side, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm guessing where you're headed. You're headed towards staff recommendation, which is essentially considering these as off-premise signs. Although they don't necessarily meet the criteria, I think we've demonstrated that based on this property, they perform as off-premise signs.
Correct.
Correct.
That's correct.
Mhm. And there is no doubt about that. That is where I'm going. And I get the sense of the board, but we need to make sure that we do it in a way that is clear and above board and meets all the criteria for a Board of Appeals hearing. Is there a suggestion of a different way to do this?
1 second, please.
All righty.
We're just trying to figure out an easier way.
If you have an easier way, I'm all for it.
Never mind.
Okay. All right. If we could hear the, our motion.
So a motion for the first variant would be motion to conditionally approve a variance to town code 1738-170-13, allowing a 15-foot maximum sign height with the following conditions as stated in staff memo, based that the authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purposes of this title or the public interest.
I have one. We need to take out the word conditionally approve.
Oh, okay,
Because
yeah,
if we approve,
yeah, approve, yes, thank you,
it's
thank you,
not a conditional approval.
yeah, thank you.
It is an approval of the variance.
It is a condition of approval because they still have to meet those conditions.
But our approval isn't conditional
Yeah, no, so it's an approval with the following condition.
with the
Right.
following.
Yeah,
conditions,
that's fine.
Which is a different,
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Well,
That's
well,
okay.
what I believe you need to add
the other two.
you need to add the other two, and you also need to add for the proposed on-premise freestanding sign bordering US Route 15 at
Oh,
the address.
okay.
So we clarify which sign we're talking about.
Okay.
So essentially, motion number one is going to be staff's suggested motion one, taking out the bit referring to the 150-foot
Okay.
square footage. Proposed motion number two is going to be the exact same motion without the first clause referring to sign height.
got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. But we need to put these other two conditions in, findings of fact and conditions. So we need to put those in before we put that third one in,
Okay, so all three,
all three.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
So we need to say that there are no exceptional or extraordinary circumstances. or
Okay.
Conditions applying to the property in
Well, no,
question.
I'm sorry. There are exceptional circumstances applying to the property because you are finding a variance. Staff's recommendation is a variance.
that all of the following facts and conditions exist.
Yes, that's where I was headed. If you're saying they meet the condition of basically you're approving off-premise criteria to an on-premise sign, you could grant a variance on that based upon us meeting those. Because otherwise, you have to say, why do you meet the conditions for
An
15 feet, but
off-premise,
not for 50?
Right, which is what needs to happen.
right? All right, in terms of discussion, there are some exceptional circumstances to the topography of the land. Correct? We agree with that. All right. That do not apply generally to other properties or classes of use in the same zoning district. I mean, the topography is the only thing that I can see there. That such variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same zoning district. Actually, the only two that are even possible aren't even built yet, so I don't. Well, in the same zoning district, so in our B2 district. You're right, they're both variances. One's just less of a variance than the other one.
Correct, that's why I was, if you approve a variance to it be considered an off-premise sign, you get to this, you get to the same result of the recommendation. Understand.
That is correct. Because what staff has suggested is to treat these signs as off-premises signs. You still need to make a finding of fact that the criteria for granting a variance has been met. If you are granting any sort of variance to the sign codes that are being requested.
But if it was considered an off-premise sign, we wouldn't be. Would it be simpler knowing what's happening? And I'm just going wild here, for the applicant to request an off-premise sign?
No.
No, they would have to do a subdivision and the,
I guess that's why.
I'm
You
just,
don't meet the criteria by the letter of the zoning law to be an off-premise sign. But could you, as an applicant, request a variance to be considered an off-premise sign?
In theory, when we submitted our application for a variance, it was to the specific.
on premise.
Right, so then to be able to change what we're requesting a variance for would require a different hearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where there's a problem, but excuse me if I'm speaking out of turn, could they make a motion to approve the variance as proposed by staff? Could that be the language?
Yeah, so the issue is not that the language proposed by staff is unacceptable. The staff proposed motions could be voted on and passed, but the board needs to make a finding of fact that the criteria for granting that variance has been met.
And the criteria for meeting those are the three statements of fact and finding that we've got in front of us. But I don't even know if it would be proper then. We're actually changing the definition. It's not an off-premise sign. We're applying the conditions for an off-premise sign to an on-premise sign.
Yeah, so we can't, so the off-premise sign idea, I'm not even sure that that is something that you can apply. Like, I don't know that variances apply to that type of situation. Variances apply to changes in, height,
Existing.
area, use, etc. I just sitting here right now, I don't even know that you could apply for a variance to have an on-premise sign treated as an off-premise sign. Does that make sense? I don't think that's,
Technically, it's following similar you're guided accordingly by the off-premise things, but it doesn't need to be mentioned in the motion that it has anything to do with off-premise.
I agree 100% with Clark. Yeah, 100%. You couldn't apply it to be an off-premise sign.
Right.
That's why we did specific. We copied and pasted.
Right, no,
Yeah.
yeah, so the question is how to form the motion, and by saying that
Correct.
it has anything to do with off-premise sign is upsetting the apple cart, actually. It really doesn't need to be called attention to.
Correct.
yeah,
Their-
right.
your staff-
Correct.
Your staff
Okay,
recommendation is a variance, just a lower version of what we're.
Exactly.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So-
But since it's also a variance, we have to say that that variance is still meets the same following facts and conditions, or we're plumb out of luck and we
Right.
could get appealed. So we have to make sure that the wording is correct.
Okay.
I think we're all in violent agreement on this. We just have to, well, it's,
All right.
we
This is
just
my,
have to find the right words.
this is my suggestion. I think that you should take staff's suggested motion.
Mhm.
Don't try to craft new language. Make your findings of fact that the variances that staff is suggesting meet the criteria that you need to find in order to award any variance in the code section that we've been looking at. And then just vote on the suggested staff motions as is.
As a group.
Suggested motion 1, suggested motion 2, suggested motion 3.
Okay. All right. Pardon? It does. All right. So the first fact and condition is that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question. I think we all agree that that condition exists, correct? Do we all agree? We have to say, we are accepting staff motion number 1 for variance request 1 and 2, based on the fact that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions
And why you think that?
because of the topography of the land and the situation of the land behind the hill. And then we put that in, that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances based on the topography and sighting of the hill, because that's the sign on Route 15.
That's for the first motion, or the first motion, all right?
That we're still in the first motion.
Okay.
And 2, that such variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same zoning district and in the same vicinity. I have a little bit of a hard time putting a reason forward for that one, so I'd like to hear suggestions. Because somebody else could come back and say, we're in the same zoning district, why don't we get that same treatment? That's what I'm concerned about.
Well, I think we'd have to, we'd have to approve that one too. If someone wanted to come back and put up a sign, then they'd have that same right.
Right. In other words, the second fact and condition is saying there are other people in the B2 zoning district that have this right. Why don't we?
I think they probably would, I think that's a good argument, because there are physical circumstances, because if you look at it, there's trees to the, a little to the, I think to the west, that blocks the other side of the road. So, you know, the businesses on that side, it's hard to see from the road. So I think they're,
Do you think the trees would be enough? We need to make sure that we're, and
I think in this case, I think it probably is a hardship for them because you can't see their business. I think Wayne talked about the sheets that you could see it because you're on a hill and you can see the sheets. So it, in this case, you can't see it from the road, or at least from the evidence, it doesn't look like it. You're going to be able to see their business. So allowing a taller sign could provide to overcome that hardship.
I do have one more question for Tim. Tim, on the yellow dotted line indicating trees to be removed by others, my understanding was that was a forest conservation area. Is that on that?
That's not forest conservation there. We're forest conservation towards the creek.
Oh, towards the creek on this side. Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's an isolated spot. up
all
there.
of those trees will be removed. So there will be a view this way. So we
Mhm.
just need to make sure we're wording this so that we don't have 25 other businesses coming in wanting signs on Route 15.
Mhm.
Mhm.
By virtue of granting this variance, that's what we're subjecting.
Yeah, we are.
Others do.
Mhm.
Hmm?
There's no way to word it to kind of prevent that from happening. They'll just be submitted and they'll be addressed in the fields. I mean, that's what happens.
Correct. Correct. And
We agreed that we're willing to accept the town's, call it proposed alternative, which is a variance.
mhm,
And in doing so, we're opening the door to any other similarly situated businesses make similar requests.
mhm. Yes, we are.
And
And-
we have to just accept that.
Or not.
Well,
We have to
how do you not
decide.
accept it? And it basically means that we don't accept the town's alternative and we just go back to what's in the code. That's it. And that's the only way to avoid it.
Mhm.
And I think what we want is, and forgive me for speaking of it, but I think what we want is to make sure that you all have a successful, adventure here. And we are certainly not trying to create an impediment. We're trying to do our best, I think, to protect the interest of the town as well, and to observe some amount of continuity with history and how things have been done, and of course to abide by the code. If we do want to create a variance for that, for this exception, we are going to be opening the door for any one of a number of similar ones, and those have to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. I don't know how you get around.
I would say the differentiating factor for our situation would be the speed limit of the roadways. Not everyone in the town of Emmitsburg has the only roadways that they front are 50 miles per hour.
There are only two other businesses, I believe, that have the same criteria. Condition.
Yeah,
Based on what Zach said, but those properties haven't been developed yet.
correct. Yeah, we agree that there's, unique circumstances for this property. That's why we stated that this one and there's two other properties directly north of this are the only ones that we know of that, well, the only ones that have 55 miles per hour speed limits and 50 miles per hour speed limits.
Mhm. So we, just to make clear, and Wayne, you're absolutely right, and that was the dilemma I was facing, because if we don't word this carefully, we're opening ourselves up to at least requests for two other signs on Route 15
Correct.
and on Route 140 that are still, 15 feet is still high and 150 square feet is still big. So we are, yeah, and we're making decisions for the future of our town,
If-
and what
if
we want it to be.
If we stick to the code, not to go back, because 5 feet is 5 feet, but if we stick to the code of a maximum height of 10 feet and a maximum sign area of 50 square feet, we stay with, on 15. I'm open to looking at Highway 140, because I think, because my point of Highway 140, to me, that seems like an entrance to them.
Mhm.
So I'm open to discussing the height of that sign. But if we stay with the code of 10, of just what it is now, we don't jeopardize ourselves in terms of, if others want to put a sign up to code, then that's fine. Because I think Highway 15 is different than maybe Highway 140. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
So it has to be looked at differently. Signage demands are going to be different. I have a. We've been at this now for 2 hours, and I'd like to take a break. So it's 10 o'clock. Can we take a 10-minute recess? And maybe in that time, we talk amongst ourselves about the process for getting through this.
No, any discussion needs to be
We can.
in the
take a break,
public.
But
We can take a recess, but we cannot talk about anything relating to this case.
I think that is an excellent suggestion. Thank you, Wayne. Let's take a break until 10:15. It's now 10:05 according to that watch. Oh, let's see. It's 10:02. Let's come back at 10:12. Thank you. Call the meeting back to order. Was there a discussion of another route that was,
You have a question?
can we continue? I'm sorry, could you come up to the microphone? Just keeping it honest.
There you go.
I sense the general tenor of the board is that of 4 of our requests, they're going to be denied. But it appears that staff recommendation will be accepted. Do we deny it and do we get it denied and come back with a different request? So right now we're requesting 50 feet. I sensed that's going to be denied.
My initial thought there is I think that there's a limit on. I think
The
if you have a
number?
variance application denied, you can't come back with a new one
Okay.
for.
That's correct.
So, no.
Yeah.
I think the board is in agreement, from what I'm hearing, that the larger signs, correct, are not, we're not in favor of the larger signs. I'm sensing that the entire board wants to help the business succeed and not get in the way of progress. But I'm hearing from the board, and my own opinion is that we do not want to open ourselves up to a plethora of signs on either one of those roadways that advertise everything that we've got here in town. So I'm trying to craft the language in the statement of facts and findings so that we protect ourselves and the code that our commissioners have worked hard on and the character of the neighborhood, so that we can meet both of these desires on the part of the board members. That's my feeling. We're working hard to do this. We just need to find a way to make it work. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now.
Can I, Madam Chair, can I interject?
Absolutely.
So I
Yes.
think what town staff's proposing, I think that meets that criteria as what you're specifying, because we didn't add anything additional than what the off-premise sign states, or we didn't make it less.
Correct.
So I think Dr. Esses was correct in starting the motion and then basically conditionally approval with the following conditions. That I believe, my opinion, that would still protect the town from, a lot of signs being popped up. For example, one of the restrictions is it can be located no closer than 750 feet from another off-premise sign. So, if another business would hire Rutters, they couldn't hire Rutters to put an off-premise sign on their property. So Sunoco couldn't pay Rutters to put another one there. It has to be at least 750 linear feet away from it, which is a substantial distance.
My concern is not about the conditions that you laid forward.
Mhm.
My concern is wording the statement of facts.
Okay.
and Conditions. That's the only
Got it.
thing I'm
Understood.
having an issue with right now, because I can say that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances that make the variance necessary. So that meets the first fact and condition without any question. My question is on the second statement of fact, because you said we need to meet all three, that the variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same zoning district. How do we say that we're meeting that? And I can even see number 3 being met already.
I mean,
So we're not allowed, my understanding, and putting it in my own words, we can't make a variance unless all three of these conditions apply.
Correct.
what you could do is you could look at the applicants. I think there was
Explanation of it.
explanation.
That such variance.
And that
They
was
didn't address that one.
well, page 1 of.
I don't think. I mean, I didn't see it in there.
Let's see here.
Oh, yeah, the bottom of B. Okay.
Page 1,
Bottom of
exhibit
B,
2.
got it. Due to the length of time that is required for a tractor trailer to be able to make their entry.
Staff testified that, we developed the code based on scientific data, and then we outlined each. That could be potentially a possibility to meet that. I'm not sure. You can discuss it. Just a suggestion.
Well, I think from what the applicant wrote is that because if you're coming north on 15, if there's not a sign there, you don't know there's a gas station. So as it states in the code, the enjoyment of others or other property rights. I mean, if I'm reading that right, if there's no sign there, you don't know there's a gas station. But if you're coming down 140 and there's a sign, there's one there.
So would it be the multiple points of
Yeah.
entry?
Yeah,
Okay, all right, then
that
let's
makes
put
sense.
that in as the reason that we meet fact number 2. For that first motion. As evidenced by the fact that the property has multiple points of entry. Or as demonstrated by, whichever word you want to use. Okay, and then number 3, that the authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property. Okay. I'm glad I'm not taking notes.
Well, Clark will be making the decision, so as long as Clark's comfortable.
All right, that's. So what I propose now is looking at variance number 2, copying the terms that we use there for that, doing the same, pardon? Oh, I thought you said no.
That
I'm
wasn't us, no.
really sensitive to no's right now.
Did you make a finding as to number 3? The third criteria.
I just said that the authorizing of such variant will not be of substantial detriment.
Okay. Just want to be clear.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so we discussed it. It's no, in the information that the applicant put forward, it's not adjacent to Emmett Gardens. So it shouldn't damage that property, and there's no other property that's visible. So,
Thank you.
okay. So you, Clark, again, like Zach said, you're the lawyer. We got to make sure we can pass the muster on you. So our motion number 1 That is our motion.
Yeah, please read it.
Need to, okay, can you read that back?
With the reasons, right? For the
Yes.
motion, okay, so, okay, so we motion to approve conditionally a variance to town code 1738-17013,
It's
or I
I3,
three,
yep.
I3, sorry. Allowing a 15-foot maximum sign height with the following conditions as stated in the staff memo.
We need to specify what sign we're talking about.
Oh, thank you. For the proposed on premises freestanding sign bordering US Route 15 at 10201 Taneytown Pike with the following conditions approved.
Yeah, just the word conditionally should not be in that first sentence. Because
Should-
we're approving the variance with the following conditions. So with the following conditions is fine, but we're not conditionally approving the variance because that has a different legal meaning.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay. That there is an exceptional or extraordinary circumstance or condition which includes that it's on, it's unique and it's fronted by 2 roadways. And the topography here is not flat and there are mature trees on nearby lots.
Okay.
That work
Mhm. Works for
For
me.
number 1.
for number 1?
Yep.
For number 2, that because of such physical circumstances or conditions, the literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance would involve practical difficulties or cause unnecessary hardship. And the variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the B2 district and in the vicinity of the property.
Mhm. Sounds good.
That this property has multiple points of entry and unique physical conditions that would require additional signage for any reasonable use at a major intersection with poor visibility.
And
That's for 2.
right.
For 3, that the authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property.
Okay, do we need to put the rest of it in? And will
So
not material impair the purpose of this title? No. Okay, good. So we're good with that.
yes,
All right.
with one caveat. So after it says with the following conditions of approval, refer to pages 4 through 6 of the staff report. Which is
Suggested motion number 1.
exhibit 1. Excuse me.
That actually was not made as an exhibit, so
It wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't sure how you came up with 6. Clark must have put numbers on.
6 was the picture sent via email, however,
Oh, okay.
so
So this was 3.
would be 7. Yeah, I have exhibit 1 as the Rutters submitted document that was recently submitted, and she handed out the
Okay.
document. Exhibit 2 was the Rutters application. Exhibit 3 was United States Sign Council packet.
Right.
Exhibit 4 was the article. I don't have the date or
Oh,
the-
I didn't
I-
actually get that or consider it as evidence. So
so that's what I had.
Should
It's
we-
4.
should we put it in the record?
Yeah.
Okay. Since
And-
it was mentioned, we'll put it in the record.
Exhibit 5 was page 224-19 and page 224-20. That was section 173880 of the town code. 6 was picture that was sent, and then 7 would be the staff memo.
Okay.
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 So that was an official motion.
Yes. Are you making, Levi is making the official motion? All right. Do I hear a second? Second to approve that motion. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. Okay. Motion 2. The same wording on everything except the proposed square footage of the sign.
Okay. So motion to approve a variance to town code 1738 170I2, allowing 150 square feet maximum sign area for the proposed on-premises freestanding sign bordering US Route 15 at 10201 Taneytown Pike, with the following conditions of approval referred to pages 4 through 6 of staff memo.
With the same findings of fact as stated in number 1.
Yes,
Okay. Are you making that motion?
I so move.
Second from Wayne. Any discussion? No. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Number 3. Number 3 is the sign on 140. So the motion would be the same, except it would be pages 7 through 9 of exhibit number 7, staff memo.
And it would also refer to the location on State Route 140 as opposed to
State
15.
Route 140, correct. And this third motion would be to allow a 15-foot maximum sign height, and not the other one. Does he need to read it again?
Yes, he does.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Just checking.
Motion to approve a variance to town code 1738 170 I3, allowing a 15-foot maximum sign for the proposed on-premises freestanding sign bordering Taneytown Pike, State Route 140 at 10201 Taneytown Pike, with the following conditions of approval in the staff memo, referring to pages 7 through 9.
With the same findings of fact.
With the same findings and fact in 1 and 2. And right,
Correct. So moved. You move, make a motion. Motion was made by Levi, seconded by Wayne. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
aye.
Number 4. The same motion, except 150 square foot maximum sign area.
A motion to approve a variance to to Town Code 1738-170 I2, allowing 150 square feet maximum sign area for the proposed on premises freestanding sign bordering Taneytown Pike, State Route 140 at 10/21/21 Taneytown Pike with the following conditions of approval in the staff memo referring to pages 7 through 9 with
With the same findings.
the same findings in motion 1, 2, and 3.
All right. Levi has moved. Wayne has seconded. Assuming no discussion, vote. Discussion? No discussion. All right, hot diggity. Okay, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
3-0. Okay, number 5. This is the proposed, there's a maximum number of 1 proposed digital display signs per property. So the variance is to allow 2 digital display signs on this particular property located at because of the following statement of facts and findings.
And I would clarify, I should have put this in the memo. I would clarify that it's the 2 signs as discussed tonight, just in case they don't change it to somewhere else on the property.
Oh, okay. As discussed in the
The
hearing,
application, yeah,
July 19th meeting.
sure.
Okay.
So that should be added to the motion.
If you'd like,
Just
just
as
a
discussed in
protection.
the
Yeah.
July 19th Board of Appeals meeting.
Okay.
That can be a condition that it's only permitted to be the 2 signs as discussed at this meeting.
Okay. Okay. I'll make a motion.
All right. Do I hear a second? All
Uh,
right.
He hadn't
I'll re-
actually
I'll
gotten
read-
to reading it yet.
Yeah, I'll read it. I move to approve a variance to Town Code 1738-060 F4D, allowing 2 digital display signs, 1 bordering US Route 15 and 1 bordering Taneytown Pike, State Route 140 at 10201 Taneytown Pike, as discussed in the July 19th Board of Appeals meeting.
And based on the findings of fact as stated in motions 1 through 4,
Correct.
just for the record. Okay, second. We heard a motion made and a second. No discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right,
And Madam Chair, I have one more quick item. I promise it'll be quick.
sure.
I'm requesting a change of the meeting time from 7:30 PM to 7 PM from going forward from now on.
I'm absolutely in favor of that motion. Is there any problem with beginning our meetings at 7 PM? Especially in light of this one? Absolutely not. Can we start them at 1?
So
Just joking
are you
around.
making the motion then?
I make the motion that we begin the regularly scheduled Board of Appeals meetings beginning at 7 PM instead of at 7:30 PM. Do
Thank
I have a second? Seconded by Wayne. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good. Thank you, Zach. If there is nothing else,
The adjournment.
I move
Oh, very good.
to adjourn the July 19th Board of Appeals meeting at 10:35. Second,
Second.
all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.